I know we all think our cell phones are off, but I want everybody to actually check right now. I'm gonna do the same thing.
Turn my volume down, and then I put it in airplane mode.
So you busy?
Okay, checking cell phones, silence them.
I was
Not even vibrate. Make them silence. Okay. Also, you're noticing the vast crowd we have here tonight. So I like to say, please take a moment to notice your nearest exit. Like a good flight attendant. This one, and that one. So split the room in half and calmly exit out one of those doors. All right. Also, as you saw on the way in, we have cookies, we have coffee. If you find yourself in one of those things, you can get one. Also on your way out, please take a cookie, so I don't spend my weekend eating them. All right. Welcome everyone. Also, my name is Karen Silvais. I'm the Dean of Arts and Sciences for the University of Alaska Southeast, and I'm here I would like to begin tonight with a land acknowledgement. Our campuses reside on the unceded territories of the Atman, Tontaquan, and Sheepquan, Ami, also known as Juneau, Ketchikan, and Sitka, Alaska. We acknowledge that the Tlingit peoples have been stewards of the land on which we work and reside since time immemorial. We are grateful for that stewardship and incredible care. We also recognize that our campuses are adjacent to the ancestral home of the Kabas and Tsimshian, and we commit to serving their peoples with equity and care. We recognize the series of unjust actions that attempted to remove them from their land, which includes forced relocations in the burning of villages. We honor the relationships that exist between the Tlingit, Kharas, and Tsimshian peoples and their sovereign relationships to their lands, their languages, their ancestors, and future generations. We aspire to work toward healing and liberation, recognizing our paths are intertwined in the complex histories of colonization in Alaska. We acknowledge that we arrived here by listening to the people's elders, lessons from the past, and these stories carry us as we weave a healthier world for future generations. I'm so pleased to have the opportunity to introduce you to our guest speakers for tonight's talk. Dr. Jim Powell is an assistant research professor at the Alaska Coastal Rainforest Center here at UAS. And during this time of tremendous change, especially here in Alaska and the rest of the Arctic, he works with research teams, including indigenous leaders, to find ways to adapt, be resilient, and face the ever-changing future. Jim has many publications, including co-authoring Juneau's recent climate change report, which is online on UAS's website. Jim's a public servant at heart, working for the state for 40 years and serving 9 years on Juneau's assembly. Currently, he's a member of the Juneau Sustainability Commission. Jim loves music and playing mandolin. He lives in North Douglas with his wife Beth and their very spoiled Catabula hound dog Luke. He will be speaking tonight about one of his favorite subjects, how cruise ships impact Arctic communities and the environment. I'm also so pleased to introduce you to Ellen Frankenstein. Ellen's a filmmaker and an audio producer, executive director of Art Change, which is a nonprofit focused on media, storytelling, and community art. Based in Sitka, Alaska, Frankenstein has directed and collaborated on films, including Tracing Roots, A Weaver's Journey, Eating Alaska, Carved from the Heart, and No Loitering. She's a master's in visual anthropology from the University of Southern California. Now please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Dr. Jim Powell, who's starting us off tonight.
Can you guys hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Welcome. Actually, again, louder is better.
What's that?
Louder is better.
Okay.
Kind of got to keep
Is that good?
Closer.
You guys should keep
Okay.
that mic.
I'll try to use welcome. Good to see everybody. I haven't seen a lot of familiar faces on this topic that all of us have been involved in one way or another for many, many years, which is why I got involved in doing the research. But I only have, this evening, we split it into two major parts. The first part I'm going to do, I'm going to give you some research that I've done in different parts of the Arctic, looking at different communities and how they're managing change with change, which includes a lot of cruise ships. So I'm going to do that for about 15, 20 minutes. And we're going to allow a few questions after that, but then we're going to go to a movie that Ellen has done, Ellen Frankenstein from Sitka, and you'll get more of a regional view of cruise ships and what's happening. So that's the way we're dividing up the evening. So I've got 15 minutes to do a lot, so I'm going to head out and do that. So I'd like to thank our dean, who actually is really getting into this cruise ship and tourism in a big way, and it's good to have support from folks above me at the university. Okay. You've seen this scene before, probably. This is downtown Juneau on a busy day. I'm really organizing the presentation to three different ways. Kind of the study approach, we all have to have some kind of format to study things. And then I'm going to compare 4 different communities and how they're impacted. And then next steps. So this is a research team that myself and another guy from George Washington University put together. There were about 11 of us, there's about 8 of us left. Architects, economists, sociologists, interdisciplinary folks, and actually 2 folks from George Washington University. They're actually working at one of the biggest schools on tourism management in the country. They have an international school there. So just to show you that it's a very interdisciplinary team, and we have local experts from the places that we're talking about, which really is important when you're talking about local knowledge. These are the places in the Arctic that we're looking at. Juneau. We get to be Arctic here because the National Science Foundation says you can be included because you're in the state of Alaska, so we're able to do that. So it's Juneau, Nome, which is very interesting these days. Akureyri, which is the northern part of Iceland, and then Bergen, Norway, and Visby, Sweden, which is on the island of Gotland in the middle of the Baltic. They're just starting to get some cruise ships. So those are the locations. But the main questions that we're looking at, and maybe we want to talk about that this evening, is what are the Juneau's limits of acceptable change? We live in a very dynamic world. It's getting more dynamic all the time. So basically, how do we change with change and sustain the things that we really care about? Okay, and then what can we learn from other communities? Because they're doing the same things in different parts of this process of adapting to cruise ships. Then I got to throw in one kind of systems thing. My approach really is to look at things in a sustainability format. And this is a little different than the top 3 that you always hear about, economic, social, environmental. We add public policy and technology. And there's really good examples in this community how we maximize that by plugging in a cruise ship. We're maximizing technology as much as you can. And we've had a lot of public policy on dealing with cruise ships. So we use these 5 different areas. We look at 5. Tonight, I'm looking at the environmental, and also some of the public policy and some of the socio-cultural. I can't go into economics, that's a whole big thing, and that's been publicized a lot. The one that hasn't been a lot is putting together all the environmental impacts into one package, and that's what I'm trying to do, because it's been very siloed by government. And so I'm going to go to the first place here in Juneau. I've got some slides, and a person that I've contracted with used to be The head of the cruise ship program and was in the program for many years, a guy named Ed White, who's down here. He's kind of my wingman tonight. He worked with me at DEC when I was there, but he has gotten into this area in a big way. He's internationally known. He works with the International Maritime Organization on these issues. So I keep him close. So I'm looking at different areas. I put air and water in that bubble up there first because the state and the feds regulate air and water, okay? We really get their laws from the feds and the state comes up with stuff. But we really, that's how we look at it. And I can go into that, and I'm going to go into that in a little bit. How else have we managed things? We plugged in and we use shore power. I don't know if you know that, but that was the first in the world. We were the first in the world to plug in a cruise ship. We were also first, which I'm very proud of, is a wastewater discharge law. We were the first in the country to have discharge laws for cruise ships. They didn't have that before. And then Senator Murkowski, Frank Murkowski, passed a federal law to even get rid of what was called the donut holes, and I bet some of you people know what that is. So he helped so that the discharge goes out beyond all the islands. And then we have, and this is a thing that's happened in the last few years. It's called the Green Corridor. I don't know if you've heard about that. It's where communities are getting together and working together. And I'd like to submit that there's a power imbalance. We're a small community. These are big billion-dollar industries. Okay. I'll tell you a quick story. I was on the assembly in the 1990s, and we were starting to deal with cruise ships and the impacts. And I said, you know, we really need to get a plan. We need to get in front of the cruise ships. I walked out of the meeting, and a guy named Tom Garrett, who you might remember, he worked in the industry, and he said, Jim, do you think for a minute we're going to get ahead of a billion-dollar industry? We're basically volunteers here. Well, we have, but there's a power imbalance that we're struggling with. How do you do that? Well, the Green Corridor is another way of dealing with that. We're bringing communities together. Right now, this Green Corridor is being established between Juneau, Vancouver, and Seattle. We're working together towards zero emissions. That's huge. And talking to our tourist manager, who we've just hired at the CDJ a couple years, or I think she's been there maybe for a year, which is wonderful. We're one of the small communities that has a tourism manager, which is really important. Anyway, she's working on that, and maybe that's something that the Southeast can do, is bring at least 4 communities together: Skagway, Juneau, Sitka, Ketchikan. Right. That might be something to look forward to as far as dealing with billion-dollar industries. Okay, that's enough on here. I do have some slides and stuff. Oh, I want to mention, because there's so much data, and some of you guys are, you know, you used to work with me, and I know that you guys like data. I put supplemental data sheets at the end of my presentation because I'm not going to be able to get through them. So this will be available, so you can get into the latest data. But I won't show it here. I'm kind of in bubbles to get through it. So next, visitors. We got a lot of them. We broke all records this year, as you guys know. We had 1.628, I think, million people. So it's a lot of people. And to some people it's too many, to some people it's not enough. So what happened? What did we do? Well, last year we signed an MOU. It's a negotiated agreement between the city and the industries. A negotiated agreement. That's the first time that's ever been done. There are 3 others in the world besides us. That's an attempt to say, this is what we want, and you're signing down so that you will do it. And one of those things that they signed on to, and you probably know, is that limiting the cruise ships to 5, and that starts next year. We've had up to 7 and some small ones too in our harbor at one time. So we're doing that. And we have this Tourism Best Management Practices document that started back in 2000, 2001, I'm not getting the date exactly right. But we started with like 9 best practices. It's an industry-driven thing, but we sign off on it and we fund some of it from the city. They've got over 90 best practices. I'd submit as a regulator, You could never put that in regulation. It's so small, the things that they do and the way that they're managed. I think that was an accomplishment. It is such an accomplishment that other communities, it's being exported right now to Skagway, Ketchikan, and I think Sitka. So it's something we started here, so we should be very proud of that. I'm saying we're very proud. We needed to do it. Okay, we needed to do all these things, but we did it. Noise, that's kind of coming back a bit. When in the 90s, remember the helicopters flying over residential areas? Well, now they're up on the ridges, but maybe it's the volume, maybe that's starting to ramp up. So we did some of that, and we changed technology again. So it's kind of a history lesson here, but I want to put things in perspective. We're not just here, we've done a lot to get there. And I'm not paid by the industry at all. So whales, that's getting to be a bugaboo. That's a tough one. Did you guys know there's only like 2 laws out there right now? NOAA has a law of, no more than, or nothing less than 100 yards, you have to be 100 yards off, and there's a time limitation. There is no limitation on number of boats. So, I'm very proud to say that the tourists, the whale charter operators have gotten together this summer and met because they want something good out there too. So they're coming up with new proposals that will limit the number of charters around the whale. And that's very, very good news. But they're taking it on themselves. And there are 19 tourism management practice items in the tourism management best practices document that go towards whales. Now, I don't have any of these because I figured you probably don't want to see them, but this is from 2000. This is just one graph on how wastewater we've taken that on. Why did that drop from 2001 down to almost nothing as far as fecal? We passed some laws. There wasn't a law before that. That's one of the things that happened. Here's air. There's a little blip there around 2016 to 2020. Why did that happen? Technology was trying to figure itself out. They started using different fuels and everything, and the complaints went off the chart. So there's a blur. This stuff you guys will be able to see and research, look at. So what do we do? This is a graph that has been put together. The vertical up and down line is the number of visitors. So you can see how that's increased. Well, the little points on there, you can see, you probably can't read them very well. That's the activity. Those point to the things that the CBJ has done. Tourism advisory committees, now it's part of our comprehensive plan. And then most recently, and I think it's really good, is that we've hired a tourism manager, and she did really good. And we did an MOU that I was talking about, this negotiated agreement. And right now, maybe some of you have gotten it, there was a survey that's gone out, an opinion survey. And I got it. I was sitting working on this, and I get this call. Would you like to take a survey on tourism? I just laughed. I go, yeah, I'll take it. But that's good. We want to know. And that'll be a statistically valid survey, too. It'll be about what the community wants. So, and anyway. Next to Bergen. I'm running out of time. Bergen is a place that is a case study that we're comparing it to. It's hard, comparisons, different sized cities, it's tough. But they're getting cruise ships, and it's interesting what they're doing. That's how many, you can read how many people are coming. They've limited their passengers. And the way they did it, I interviewed the Port Authority guy. It was really kind of funny. I said, well, do you limit your cruise ships? And he goes, yeah, we did it. What's the Port Authority? He just decided to do it. He had the authority because they're all public docks. And he thought, well, how many? Well, I went downtown and looked around. I thought, well, this is about the right number. I thought, wow, the benevolent dictators work sometimes. So I thought that was really good. And so it's a big port, it's 280,000 people. They have a lot of stuff going on. But they said, we don't want to crowd our streets with a lot of more visitors than we need. So these are just more bubbles about how they're doing it. The other thing that was interesting to compare with is they aggregate their environmental pollution. They put all their pollution, air, water, solid waste, into an index. And basically the way it works is if you're doing well, it's an incentives program. If they add it all up and it comes out to a number, and that number is below a certain level, then they pay less fees. So it's an incentive-based thing. However, it's interesting, and they have shore power, they're starting shore power. Their country, their cruise ship ports right now are mandated to go zero emissions by 2026. So what's going to happen to that index? I was thinking, like, well, you don't have any emissions then. And they take on businesses. They use pollution as a business. They take on the different pollutants. So I think I'm going to, I think I'm going to go ahead through this because I'm running out of time. The next port, Akureyri, Iceland. I was just there about 3 weeks ago. Interviewed the port authority there, and I said, "Do you guys limit your cruise ships?" And he said, "Yeah, it's to 5,000 a day." And I said, "How'd you come up with that?" He goes, "Well, I walked downtown." I said, "I was looking around." He said, "It's pretty crowded, so you better do something about it." So again, he has a public port, and he has the ability, the authority to do it. And he did it. It's amazing. Anyway, he also, they also use the Environmental Port Index. It's getting popular that way. I'm not so sure I support that because we like to silo things in the United States, and maybe that's better, I'm not sure. And the IMO, the International Maritime Organization, has started to really kick in on the types of fuels that you use. They're cracking down, too. So the last place I'm going to talk about is Juneau. I was there this summer. I was there for 2 weeks. I was up there in the 80s on another job. It hasn't changed a bit. It's interesting. Juneau is kind of stayed in time, but they've got a lot of support from federal government. They're going to redo this whole port that will allow cruise ships in there. They're looking at a few now, but they are.
I hate to say it, but they are totally unready for cruise ships. Public facilities, and then there's a subsistence. You have actually, I don't know if you guys have been there lately, but they've got musk ox wandering around. And one guy got, I think, killed by one. So they got to deal, and then there's marine mammals on the shores, so they got to deal with the subsistence thing and practices. So that's a little different. And they don't, it's so early that it's, there's not much out there on pollution and everything else. So what are the kind of limits of acceptable change? What do we want to do? Because the bottom line of all this is if we don't create our future, somebody else is going to create it. And we've been managing it for quite a while, but have we managed it enough? That's up to us as a community. We have to do it, I think. There are others that are trying to do it. Bar Harbor, Maine, Sitka, I don't know if you've been reading the papers, they're trying to limit. And then I've got to give it to the whale charter operators. They've stepped up and said, we got to do something about the number of boats. So they did it themselves. Bob Janes and others testified in front of the assembly about a month ago saying this is what's going on and we need to do something about it. We get 500 to 700, these are big, wide numbers, but it's a lot of people that they're trying to accommodate, but it's a lot for them to do. So this is the end, and I've taken more time than I should have, but a few thoughts to end with. Can the MOA, this negotiated agreement that we have, the CBJ between the majors, okay, can that work? Because we're limiting to 5 ships, and there are other things in that agreement, right? Green Corridor, feasibility study going on right now on different alternative fuels that you might be able to use to get to that zero. Have a current survey that's out. Please answer it. Please answer that. There's a hotline. That's looked at every day by this new tourism manager. That's just don't blow that off. You got a complaint, please file it. It's one way we can get our handle on it. And then what I've been doing is getting into building scenarios. I also work on wildfire and permafrost and rain and winter in Anchorage, Fairbanks, and Whitehorse, and we've been putting together scenarios for the future. Are we thinking out enough about the future we want to be? How many people do we want to allow? Over 2 million? Forest Service, if they're modeling out to 2 million and more. You know, so what do we want as a community, and how do we get there? Anyway, so I'll end there. Gunashchish. I know it's short, but I have limited time. And thanks so much for being here. Here's some thanks. Thanks. There is supplemental information that I'm just kind of blasting at you right now. There's data, so you guys that want to get into data, there's some sheets there. And please call me. You know, you can get me through the university if you have questions or real interested and blah, blah, blah. It will be. Will be. Yep, yep. Okay. No, I'm going to try to go over to there.
Can you hear me without a microphone? No. Oh, yeah. You can't hear me? Oh, good, because I like to pace, and then Jim can start the film.
Yeah.
Jim, thank you. I want to start with a few thank yous and get into the film, but I want to thank the university for being this is one of the first places we've shown the film, and I also have to thank Jim. We've worked together before, and his NSF funding kind of slid over so I could afford to finish this film. So what I want to what can I say to start this film? Yes, you were some of the first people to see it, and I didn't mean to make this film. I've lived in Sitka like 29 years. I sort of thought I was done with making longer films. But some anthropologists I've worked with since I was long before I had gray hair, came to town and they said, this town is changing, you need to document it. And so I thought I was gonna make a short film, and it became long. Lost my train of thought, but I wanna say one of the other great things about being here, another thanks and appreciation, it's really fun to see my friends in Juneau and people that I've worked with over the years, and even a board member of my nonprofit. But anyway, so this film was done over a 1.5-year period, sort of shot, and a young man was working with me who's now getting his PhD in economic history, helped on the film. And I've never made a film that felt like history so fast. Years ago, I asked Ken Burns for a job before he was a household name. He said, do your own thing. But I must say, this is the film that it's become historic because it ends last fall. And Sitka's way behind you all in terms of the number and the kind of concentration, would you say? What's the way to say it, Jim? Like,
Yeah.
you know. So we've always referred to those places like Juneau, Skagway, and Ketchikan. So anyway, I have no idea what this film is going to say to you who are on a different journey in your cruise ship experiences. But I also hope by showing this film, it creates some of this conversation, some of the things that even Carla's been doing in her work, where we realize we need to work together, whether it's regionally or internationally, all the more. So we're going to throw up a QR code, and it's up all over, and I would love to get some feedback from you. And let me know, and I hope this spurs some more conversation and adds to what Jim said. So thank you.
Do I need to hit something?
Oh, here she comes.
Oh, there it is.
Maybe.
There we go.
Good morning, are you guests of Sitka? Our taste of Sitka, I'm sorry. Into our building, please, here and to the right, there's benches and seats, and we're gonna get you some stickers, and we'll get you all conducted to your buses shortly. Thanks. Come here, taste of Sitka.
You are listening to Radio KCAW Sitka. Around 480,000 cruise passengers are expected to travel to Sitka this summer, following the recent expansion of the private Sitka Sound cruise terminal. More growth than any other port in the state. On the biggest days of the cruise season,